What's going on, guys? Taking the gloves off tonight. 3 weeks till the election. The tension in the United States is crazier than it's ever been. The propaganda machine is turned up to 12. There are seismic rumblings already trickling back through history and affecting us in this moment. The sun is spewing out 30,000 kilometer sun tornadoes. Everything is going crazy, but especially the voters in the United States. In this light stream, I am going to make a very solid, I would say unarguable case for the fact that the polytrichol shitstem, the political system in the United States, is 100% a farce. I'm going to explain what the purpose of the presidents are. We're going to talk about wedge issues and why they're chosen, how they work, what they're for. And I'm also going to demonstrate how easy it would be to find a middle ground that would actually satisfy everyone and create unity. United we stand, divided we fall. That was the motto of the United States for as long as I can remember. And if that holds true, the way things are looking, we better put on our helmets and pack our parachutes. Brace for impact. So, should we discuss these candidates? First and foremost, Donald Trump, obvious narcissist, billionaire, megalomaniac, long history of fraud, including but not limited to screwing over blue-collar workers, declaring bankruptcy so he doesn't have to pay them, Trump Tower, premium price, particle board floors. The guy has been like a used car salesman in God mode his entire life. His father had connections to the Klan. He got a $500 million loan to start his businesses. He said, I got a small loan, a beautiful loan, the best loan. He remarked to a Washington Post reporter, is it wrong, or he asked him, is it wrong that I'm more attracted to my daughter, who was 13 at the time, than I am to my wife? You can find this on YouTube, on Howard Stern. He was telling the story of when he first met Paris Hilton. He said, man, she walked in the room and I just thought, that girl is hot. She was 12 years old. He's settled, I think, 11 sexual assault cases out of court, some of them against minors. Tons of pictures of him with Diddy and Epstein. And yet, he is regarded as a prophet by a lot of his followers. They have engineered the perception that he's gone rogue against the deep state in order to justify Project 2025. That's what the assassination attempt was about. That's what this rhetoric, like recently he said that he thought it would be a good idea if he allowed at least an hour, but maybe a whole day, where people could go and just kill. He didn't say kill, but deal with, or something like that, the undesirables, to rid the United States of vermin. And if you've been following me for a long time, you know that I predicted, based on the propaganda around him, like the people that see him as a prophet, that's not an accident. That perception was engineered deliberately. And as time has gone by, especially recently, he's gotten more and more congruent. The things he says are more and more congruent with that dictator agenda, which I don't think it's him, by the way. There are bigger powers at work. So I could go on and on about Donald Trump and what a wretched fucking person he is. But let's talk about Kamala Harris as well. Your alternative to this giant orange douche, Kamala Harris, camel toe hairy ass. She's famous for having slept her way to the top. You know, I know a lot of feminist types say that's a cheap shot, but in her case, it's not. It was well publicized. It's a joke amongst politicians in California, you know. But it gets worse. Her probably most egregious act as prosecutor, there was a man who was wrongfully convicted, and evidence was uncovered that suggested that she knew the whole time, to the extent that several judges called her things like deplorable, unconscionable, evil. You know, and there are transcripts of these court cases online. You can find them. So when it became obvious, undeniable, that this man was innocent, she actually went so far as to say he should remain on death row even if he's innocent because he filed his papers too late. She's going to kill this man, innocent or not, because he filed papers late. Right? And then the Supreme Court issued an injunction saying she needed to release thousands of nonviolent prisoners in California because people were dying. It was so overcrowded. People are dying, including people with short sentences. People continue to die. That makes her a murderer. She knew people were dying, and she kept them in prison, some of them illegally past their release date, on the grounds that they were providing cheap or free labor for the state. Slaves. When what is it, like the preliminaries, or, you know, before they have their candidate, they have the debate, and somehow Biden came up, and she said the only thing we need to know about Joe Biden is he more of a racist or more of a rapist. A couple weeks later, she was announced as his running mate, and suddenly she's honored to serve beside him, which is proof of this power whore thing. She has no integrity, no morals, total sociopath, willing to do anything to climb the ladder, to the extent that her own father has disowned her. She likes to sell herself as middle-class kid. That's a lie. Her family's wealthy. They were the largest slaveholders in Jamaica at one point, and she claimed that she paid her way through school working at McDonald's. No, she didn't. No one can do that. It's not possible. You know, and I could go on and on about her, but that's enough. You know, this kind of frames this. Is it possible to sell your soul? Maybe we'll get into all that weirdness after I make this point here. So, here's the main bullet point of this presentation. And I'll preface it by saying that if you consider the dumbing down of the American population over the last 15 or 20 years, and you consider all the restrictions on people, the mandates on your health, and the restrictions on pretty much anything you want to do, right? The government basically won't let you cross the street at will at this point. You really think they're going to let you choose presidents? These overlords that have these massive fortunes and put their destiny and their fortune in the hands of some puppet that's chosen by Walmart shoppers that are so full of benzodiazepines that the oceans around the United States are testing positive? It's absolutely ridiculous to believe this. And also considering that we know that the wealth is concentrated in this tiny little less than 1%. It all consolidates the same point. Those people control both sides. And if you're versed in the techniques and the machinations of propaganda, and then you look at the rhetoric on both sides, and you have some context, it blows my mind that anyone fails to see that these puppets are fed rhetoric that is designed to do two things: to give you a false illusion of choice and to divide the people, and to keep them distracted and focusing on issues that may not be of no consequence, But there's certainly not those things that should be front and center. You know, we have bigger things to fix than abortion, for example. That's a wedge issue that I'm going to use to, you know, elucidate and pontificate upon the state of their most great and perfect plan. Yeah, Veterans Cannabis Advocacy Group is saying there's no solution. To an extent, that's true. There's no easy solution. That's definitely a fact. So let's talk about this wedge issue technique. Because, you know, to me, it seems like the fact that the United States has fallen below the top 20 in education, some of the health, you know, the aspects of healthcare are like at the bottom. Like they're like number one in infant mortality and, you know, cancer. Education, healthcare, happiness, way down. So when these politicians are debating, not to mention the fact that neither Camel Toe nor Donald Trump at the debates went for the jugular. She didn't mention his nefarious past. He didn't mention the keeping the innocent man on death row. You know what I mean? The things that really would matter when evaluating these candidates. Just stuck to the, you know, wedge issue narrative. That in and of itself should be telling for people. But abortion, and before you get mad at me, you know, for saying all this, just remember, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. It's got nothing to do with what I think personally, right? Although, for the record, I do feel like people should be able to make the choice. But the way that this discussion is framed is basically my body, my choice versus illegal no matter what, even in cases of like incestuous rape. And as long as you have both sides taking an untenable lunatic position, there's no chance of resolution. And so I was thinking about all this a little while back, and I decided to do some digging. And it turns out that it's true that there's a new DNA strand at the moment of conception. So on a technical level, objectively, the argument my body, my choice is kind of invalidated. Because as soon as you have something in you that has its own unique DNA strand, it's not you. On the other hand, this is a cell or a clump of cells that is not attached to anyone. It has no eyes, has no heartbeat. It doesn't know it's there. If it does, it's at an absolutely baseline, fundamental level of awareness. Right? So one potential solution to this is that people actually start using that argument rather than one that is completely objectively wrong. I also found a video where a baby had been born premature at only like, I don't want to say 24 weeks. That sounds ridiculous. But it wasn't, you know, illegal in some states. And the child could recognize the mom's voice. It would close its hand around a finger. Obviously, if it was stuck with a needle, it would feel terror and pain. And that's crazy. That's crazy. So what I'm getting at here is that if the overlords or the presidential candidates, even whoever, really wanted to resolve this, they would be putting these things out there in that context and looking for a middle ground to offer people. Like, okay, late-term abortion might be crazy unless there are extreme circumstances. She should have to just give the baby up for adoption. You know, because even I feel like jabbing a baby that's capable of grabbing a finger with a needle, or even whatever, pills, whatever, it's cruel. You know? So there's no doubt in my mind that if the two sides were taking positions that were objectively valid, more progress could be made. And the fact that that's not being done is deliberate. Because these things serve a purpose as a distraction and a way to divide the populace. And then again, if that's not true, explain to me why it is that we're not focusing on the fact that there are, 7 out of the 10 top countries in the metrics of happiness, healthcare, and education all have the same systems in place to facilitate that. Why aren't we discussing that as one of the primary issues? Why all this lunacy and so little that's coherent? And then when you look at you don't even know if it's boiler room propaganda or real people at this point either, on X. But the arguments that people make, because they're wrong, are based on lunatic logic. They have to frame things in ways that do not make any sense. In fact, I might pull up X and share my screen so that we can go through some of this stuff and I can give you better examples or specific examples. Then there's the element of scapegoat, right? And this works very well because the average person on either side of the aisle, not the extreme ones, not the blue-haired, multi-gendered, communist whatever's on the left, or the born-again Christian, Trump is a prophet, space is fake, the sun's been replaced by, you know what I mean? Not those people. But the people that are just kind of average folks. They're generally basically good. And they're not thinking outside of certain parameters. So when they offer these candidates that are just clowns, they're ridiculous. It's like a caricature of a presidential candidate. Then all of the nefarious stuff that goes on behind the scenes can be chalked up to bumbling bureaucracy, people that are out of touch, incompetent, maybe a little bit corrupt, but tolerable. But then if you consider the information resources that the government has, that no longer makes any sense. It's not tenable. Right? So that's the reality, folks, and I know a lot of people hate it. They scoff, they roll their eyes, they cancel their Patreon. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron if you appreciate this content, because I'm demonetized. On another note, as far as who's actually controlling, who's pulling the strings, who are the puppet masters, there's a lot of attention on like the Rothschilds in particular, and probably for good reason. There are maybe like 12 Italian families that are probably even wealthier and more powerful. They say that when Rome collapsed, it became a church. When England collapsed, it became a bank. And that's basically, the Vatican, and they're a tremendous power on this planet. And the English royal dynasty is another one, right? Speaking of things that make no sense and are non sequitur, or however you say that word, I'm not saying the Revolutionary War didn't happen, but I think there's a reason that they tell you this stuff when you're 7. You don't care, and you're not going to think about it again, right? But the story they gave us is that the largest empire, most powerful empire on the planet at the time, couldn't defeat some settlers that were not only just a fledgling, not even nation, but they were divided against each other on top of it. People constantly spying and betraying. And then they sent their soldiers over and had them stand in rows so they were easily just picked off. They didn't call on their allies and come over here and just stomp this rebellion out. Why? Easier and cheaper to just let them think they won. They actually had meetings where they asked people that were present, does anyone have experience in government? The MI5 agents from the British Empire stood up. I do. They set up the government, and then I think 41 out of 42 of them went back to work for Parliament. Canada, the United States, Australia. I have a feeling that they actually did run them out of South Africa. But I think these have always been basically satellite nations of the British royalty. But then we have another player on the stage, another actor on the stage. BlackRock State Street Vanguard. They own 85% of the Standard & Poor 500. And that was as of like 3 years ago, so I don't know where it's at now. They're on track to own 60% of residential homes in the United States by 2030. Who are they? Well, if you trace the follow the money up to the point, Merrill Lynch, parent company. But there's no board. Nobody knows who the board is. So, Robert Anton Wilson wrote in one of his books that if you follow the trail of the Illuminati, it just goes up in smoke. So if you follow the trail of BlackRock State Street Vanguard, goes to Merrill Lynch and then goes up in smoke. And I discovered something interesting today because I've been developing a theory about who BlackRock really is and why Israel seems to be one of the puppet masters, right? Trump, RFK Jr., Biden, Harris, on, all support Israel. Why is that? I thought these were all people with opposing political views. And of course, there's a lot of other sketchy business. I mean, I don't need to go into it. Everyone knows that. In fact, there's good evidence that Israel has participated in black ops on behalf of the United States government because President Johnson ordered an attack on an American ship, and there's actually a phone recording of him saying, I want that fucking ship on the bottom of the ocean, attacked American soldiers. And the survivors on their deathbed, because they were told if they ever talked about it, their families would be killed. So they waited till they were on their deathbed. And some of them talked. And their stories are all identical. They said that it was Israeli jets. So, I've been kind of wondering about that. And the CEO of BlackRock is Larry Fink, who is a Zionist Jewish man. So that kind of got my gears going. So today I looked up what the word vanguard means. And I knew the one definition was it's, somebody that is pushing something forward. But the other definition is an advancing army. So you have BlackRock, which has a subsidiary called Blackstone, right? So Mecca is a black rock that contains a black stone. They say it may be a meteorite or something. State Street suggests government. Vanguard, an advancing army. So maybe it's all coincidence, but hear me out. So this connection with Israel and the Muslim world does not seem that viable. There's tension there, they fight. But at the same time, the Rothschilds were Jewish and they were funding Hitler. The United States seems to be giving weapons to both Hamas and Israel. This is a common thing for the overlords to play these games because they're not really loyal to anyone or anywhere, any nation. They are those nations. And so the other day I saw a rabbi that had a black rectangle on his forehead. So I looked it up. What is this? When they pray, the men wear it. It looks suspiciously like the stone at Mecca, this big black thing that they all bow down to. It occurred to me many years ago that the Saudis must have far more power and influence than we realize. There is, amongst the Saudi royals, there is a single individual that says that he pulls $2 billion in crude out of the ground every day. This is one guy. No one can audit them because they're royalty. So no one knows how much money they have. Recently, it was uncovered that the Saudis probably were almost definitely connected to 9/11, because during a no-fly zone in the United States, or no-fly, not zone, but just no-fly, the whole nation, the U.S. government flew all the Saudi royalty out of the United States. So what I'm getting at here is that, I'm still digging into this, but my suspicion is that the Saudis and maybe some kind of Muslim world conglomerate are actually behind Israel. And they are the ones that are doing business as BlackRock State Street Vanguard. So, that's kind of not directly on the subject, but it seems important, and I really do feel like I'm onto something with all of this. Yeah, it is hilarious to listen to Kamala Harris talk, I feel like I had a lot more on deck. It's gotten late. Maybe my brain's already toast. Many subjects connect to paint a bigger picture through your own gnosis. Truth resonates and start to put the pieces together. Yeah, it's true that happens. Intuition is something that is definitely undervalued in our culture. But then, people are not helping, I guess. People that talk a lot without any sense at all, the conspiracy theorist that I was talking about in the last stream that said that the sun has been replaced by a fake sun. This is kind of related to what we're talking about now, but that guy posted again today a picture of the 20,000 kilometer or 30,000 kilometer tall tornado on the sun right now. And he's like, such obvious bullshit, These people, the flat earthers and the sun is a fake sun now and all this kind of shit, they are making it so much harder for us to reach the people that need to be reached. This situation that I've been describing with the totally bunk democracy in the United States, people are so indoctrinated. People have been brought up to believe that their integrity, that their self-worth is all deeply intertwined with their political stance, that for them to abandon the Republican or Democratic Party would be like disowning their family. And a lot of people probably would get disowned by their families. It is so difficult to even begin to enter into this conversation with the majority of people in the United States, I think. And then when you add to that the fact that people are creating this guilty by association situation with all of these idiotic conspiracy theories, it's ironic and pathetic that the very people that believe that they are exposing and overthrowing the state are actually watchdogs, guard dogs for them. They're playing right into it and serving a purpose as useful idiots. You know, speaking of useful idiots and rigged elections, you know, that's been a big subject. One side accuses the other side of Russian collusion. They've both done it at this point. Red and blue have accused the other side of Russian collusion. And when Hillary lost, the left said it was rigged, Russian collusion, and the right said, how dare you undermine our democracy? 4 years later, blue wins, red loses. They say the same stuff on the opposite side of the aisle, regardless of the fact that these very people had been saying that it was a terrible thing to even suggest you're undermining democracy. I read articles in 2016 from mainstream publications, so this was in everyone's face. One of them saying that an 11-year-old girl hacked a voting machine and changed the results in under 8 minutes. 11-year-old kid. The company that builds the voting machines admitted to having rigged them under the behest of the CIA for other countries' elections. And on and on. You know, people saying that it is ridiculous to suggest that the elections are rigged have no basis for saying that other than blind faith. Nothing but faith. All the evidence is to the contrary. It is a wild thing. It's a wild thing. And speaking of the conspiracy theorists blinding people to the truth by saying stupid shit, my last stream was about these conspiracy theories that are completely retarded. And somebody in the comments said, yeah, I'm really glad, blah, 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 you know, supporting basically the stream. And he said, some of these idiots even think they're manipulating the weather with HARP. Or no, chemtrails. And I was like, chemtrails are real. And I started doing some research to make sure I knew exactly what I was talking about. And I limited myself to government statements and publications. And I had already found a naval officer addressing Congress about how one of HARP's utilities was to mess with the ionosphere in order to influence the weather. And then the European Parliament had a debate recently about what to do about Spain, because Spain is chemtrailing the entire country with lead dioxide, which is extremely toxic and almost certain to cause health problems in the populace, and silver, I don't remember what form of silver, but silver and lead. And so they were debating the ethics of Spain doing this and trying to decide if they can stop them somehow. This is why we all have to take such serious responsibility for what comes out of our mouths. Because people have heard so much stupid bullshit from the conspiracy theory crowd that they are writing off things that are actually real and of dire importance. Madness, man. Complete madness. There's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm considering dropping this topic and moving on. One other point that I think is really relevant and important. In 2020, shortly before the election, probably about right now-ish, I was talking about all this to an audience of 20,000. The stream just blew up. And I was demonetized like 2 days later. Banned from AdSense for life. I cannot even pay for Google Ads. I've tried, it'll deny my payment method, no matter whether it's PayPal, credit card, debit card, whatever. Even I tried using someone else's. So if it's on my account, I can't do it. Any of my accounts. I even tried to make new accounts and it's still. So that kind of, I think, sends a message. If what I'm saying isn't true, why did that happen? Oh, I actually did miss something pretty significant. I think I talked about this a few weeks ago, but super valid. I mean, there's so much, you know, like if Trump is really rogue and against the deep state, why didn't they kill him? You know, and I don't even want to hear anything about that stupid ass assassination attempt that was obviously staged. And the reason being that it gives them an excuse, almost makes it necessary to purge the government of the other party in order to protect dictator Trump. You know, ain't no way that was real. Ain't no way in hell. Even if some guy did die. Collateral damage is nothing. One person, they don't care about that. Drop Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you know, on moms and dogs and babies. That's another thing that blows my mind, you know, like what people think they have too much integrity to rig an election. They have too much integrity to flood the internet with propaganda. They have too much integrity to conspire to consolidate the parties into one party because that's what you have to do before you set up a totalitarian regime. They have too much integrity. Look at the shit they've done throughout history. I cannot conceive of being able to carry the kind of cognitive dissonance around in my head that is required to play along with the farce at this point. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But if Trump was really rogue, he'd be dead. You know, the deep state hit Kennedy in a moving car. You're telling me with all the advancements in technology and whatnot that they, slip him some untraceable poison that makes him have a heart attack. He's 80 years old and overweight. No one could prove anything. It's just so stupid to believe simultaneously that they killed Kennedy for going rogue, but yet Trump is somehow just immune to death. They also did it, I think, to reinforce the perception that he is divinely protected, to help to elevate him to that divine figurehead status. And if he is not the state, I can't imagine thinking Trump's not the establishment. Epstein, Diddy, there's photos of him all over the place with him. What is her name? Maxwell Ghislaine or whatever? Ghislaine Maxwell. She claims that there are tapes of Trump hidden somewhere with underage girls. You know, and I told you the stuff about his daughter, and it's just insane. It's just so insane. And his record of ripping off working class people. Suddenly he's, got your interest at heart. I would almost bet my balls that they used compromised video to blackmail him into playing this role. There's no logical reason why he would want to do it. And if he's not the establishment, why is Elon Musk rabidly supporting him? Some other billionaire just gave him, I think, $86 million or $75 million also yesterday. Why is that? Why do all these billionaires like him so much? Absolutely inconceivable. Should we look at X and see if I can find some of this insane shit that people, like the political pages, man, it's just wild. Oh, well, here's a great post. Follow Andrea Lynn if you're on X. She says the masses on both sides are so deeply deceived and distracted that their main concern is seeing their favorite puppet master win the rigged election while ignoring the digital prison being quietly built around them. Extreme statism has conditioned people to care more about politicians than their own freedoms and the well-being of their fellow citizens. Smart girl. Well, I'm not really seeing anything right away, which is unusual. Usually I can immediately find a bunch of completely lunatic propaganda. I really like that girl, though, the Andrea Lynn. Her next post, Trump comes... Oh, wait. Anyone still promoting this obvious fraud is either a paid liar or willfully ignorant. You know, another thing to consider is that if you look at the history in the United States, right? Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. The trajectory of everything meaningful is going in the exact same direction and gaining velocity. The only difference between the two parties is the rhetoric that the puppets spew. That is all. When it comes to meaningful legislation and meaningful changes, it's not there. It's not there. In fact, Trump supporters don't seem to realize that none of the stuff that he said he was going to do during his term, almost none of it happened. They said he was going to get rid of all the pedophiles. That's all happened under the Biden administration. All these people going down for this. So, it's quite silly. There's a great quote from Jerry Garcia back in the day. He was asked who he votes for. And he said, I've never voted in my life. There's never been anything worth voting for. Choosing the lesser of two evils is still choosing evil. There is no lesser of two evils, first of all. It's the same thing. You're not voting for anything. You're not influencing anything. It's completely a shell game. It's nothing. It's literally nothing. There's no lesser of two evils. There isn't two things. Two sides of the same coin. That's it. And, you know, to kind of illustrate like how deeply indoctrinated people are, I've talked to a lot of people that will say, yes, you're right. But then they will follow that up with, but the puppet on this side says X, Y, and Z about this thing that I agree with, and therefore I'm going to vote for that one. So people have such deeply ingrained, intense cognitive dissonance around these things that they can literally say the shit out loud and still not realize the level of cognitive dissonance that they have. To say, yes, you're correct, that they are controlled and owned by the same overlords, but yet this little bit of rhetoric, it's meaningless. A lot of them know it's meaningless. And then people will ask me a lot of times when I say stuff like this, you know, I get on this subject, what are we supposed to do then? What is a better system? got nothing to do with the system. The system isn't being used. Even if democracy was the right system, the correct system, this one isn't real. That's not the point. And in order for democracy to actually be functional, it requires a populace that is well educated, that is not indoctrinated in superstitious fairy tales or, any of this wedge issue stuff that is used to keep people maniacally arguing things that you can't possibly progress on because they're both starting with fallacies. Falsehood versus falsehood. If you multiply falsehood times falsehood, you can only get falsehood. So my answer basically is that we have to do this one step at a time. And I honestly don't know if it's possible to really turn this around at this point without like a complete collapse globally, like a solar flare, the return of the sun god, wiping out all of the magnetic information and destroying all the electronics. That might give us the window. But short of things I cannot even mention without risking deletion, we have to do this one step at a time. And the first step is recognition. We as individuals, if we feel called to take a stand and to try to speak truth and fight back and shine the light in the places that people refuse to look, we have to just try to be as tactful as possible, as informed as possible, as not neutral, but sort of detached, so that our emotions don't interfere with our efficacy and our speech and our conduct. But we cannot make any concessions. You cannot pander to your parents. You cannot pander to your friends. You have no obligation to be polite, right? Like, people don't want to offend people these days. But when you are, trying not to offend people that are actively threatening our existence as a species, this is not a fair exchange. So you're not obligated to be polite. We should be tactful, but every single person that is aware of the situation and what's going on this planet needs to speak up. And you need to speak well and walk with knowledge wisely. And we have to have some kind of faith to an extent. There are so many times in my life where I have thought I was doomed. There's, no recourse that I can see. And then something incredible happens. Or I've missed an opportunity because I had doubt. When I first set out in music, for example, I thought, man, finding a middle ground between the Grateful Dead and Tool would be incredible. But I had this feeling that, these bands are already old. They're just going to fizzle out. By the time I really get it together, people probably will have moved on to something else. And at the time of this live stream, 20 years later, Dead and Company is the 5th highest grossing band in the world, and Tool is one of the top 10. The point of that being that, you should never make assumptions that deny the possibility of miracles. The most improbable thing that could possibly happen, the existence of the universe and life inhabiting it, and the complexity of all of this stuff, is already the most impossible, improbable thing that could possibly happen. could impossibly happen, really. And it did anyways. So, when I look out at the sea of brainwashed zombies, over the last couple of years, it's really sunk in how little actual thinking most people do. How much it's just an automatic running of a script. When I consider the size and strength and potency of the machine that we're trying to dismantle or re-engineer, it seems impossible to have any kind of real impact. People aren't listening, and even if they did, the thing that we have to dismantle is monstrous, godlike. And something that I missed along these lines of the machine being so big and indestructible. Another thing that boggles my mind terribly is that if you look around the world right now, especially white countries, Canada's not European. I mean, it is. I think it's owned by the crown still. But you have the UK locking up 3 times as many people as China for things they've posted online. You know how big the UK is compared to China? Australia, all of a sudden, censorship, social credit. United States, we have left-wing politicians that used to, the left used to absolutely abhor censorship, would protest and fight against it. And now we have Kerry and Clinton. Kerry said that free speech is an impediment to coming to a consensus, and it's an impediment to dialogue. Free speech is an impediment to dialogue. Like, are you fucking serious right now? And then Hillary Clinton said, if we don't get control of the internet with censorship, we're gonna lose control of everything. And many other countries too. So, the point that I'm getting at here is if there's no new world order, which is a completely stupid thing to suggest, considering that George Bush Sr., there's video of it on YouTube. He put his hand up like Hitler and said Saddam Hussein needs to heel to the new world order. None of the sheep out there in the audience stopped and said, wait, what? Doesn't he mean the United States? What the fuck is the new world order? And then his son gave a New World Order commencement speech. That's what it was called. The New World Order commencement speech. You can just Google this stuff. And that kind of puts the spotlight back on the fact that, people are laughing, scoffing, rolling their eyes, when the reality is they haven't even Googled this shit to see if there are credible sources that verify it. They have outsourced their thinking. A lot of these people, asking for sources is fine, but there's definitely this sort of attitude, especially on the left, that our thinking should be outsourced to people that are more qualified. So you don't think yourself, you just wait until you get, the words put in your mouth for you. That your thoughts are downloaded by whatever entity has been engineered to create the narratives. Another wild one is the right now. They blame everything on the Democrats, and that's deliberate. The United States has always hated the left. They have very carefully re-engineered the platform so that they are pro-censorship and, very trusting of the government and big pharma and all this stuff. and they did that with Obama. That was his main purpose. Let's put a cool black man in there that everyone trusts. And the consequence of that was that all of these left-leaning people suddenly trust the government, which was never the case before that. But the right, somehow believing that the Republican Party is suddenly not deep state. What about George Bush and 9/11? What about the fact that the oil companies and all these massive money fucking giants have always been on the right? They talk about the liberal control of the media when the owners of those media outlets are right-wingers. And it's because that's the point of it. It's not about them being right or left. It's about using the media to demonize the left and foment division. And there are right-wingers behind it. Something like right-wingers. Elite. It's just all so ridiculous, and it's so easy to see through it. The veil is so thin. And, if you say, well, the Republican Party obviously has always been deep state, but Trump isn't, why is he the candidate? And they talk about the left-wing pedophilia and all this. I did a bunch of research. Turns out that the overwhelming majority of convictions of sex offenders in politics are on the right, not the left. In fact, one right-wing media outlet, I don't remember which one, countered this list with a list of Democrat politicians that had been in trouble for that, but they had to add a bunch of Hollywood people, actors and stuff, in order to make the list as long. Like Andrea Lynn was saying on X when I was scrolling through there, at this point, if you are playing along with this shit, you're either paid or it's willful ignorance. Because it is boneheaded obvious. All of the stuff that I'm saying. It's all written on the wall. What do I think is the general competency of the elites who are really steering the ship? See, that's the thing. And this is something that I think people on both sides underestimate quite a lot. I actually grew up around a lot of elite people. I lived in Fairfax, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C., and there are a lot of affluent neighborhoods there. A girl in my second grade class had Reagan and Schwarzenegger over for dinner. That was like her show and tell, And I've heard how they talk in their homes, and they're human. Some of them drink. And I think they also assumed that I was a child and probably didn't really follow stuff that I was hearing, or they're just like accustomed to not paying attention to children. I know how they think. And that brings me to another side note that it blows my mind that people actually believe that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or any of these people see the common person as anything more than bacteria. That's just like the most naive, ridiculous fucking thing. How could anyone possibly believe that? Like, think about how normal people look down on like a crackhead or a homeless person, or even somebody that doesn't have a college degree. And then scale that up to Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Come on, come the fuck on. They don't give a fuck about you. But the competency of the real elites is really high. People talk about how they're inbred and whatnot, but that's just the royals. And those aren't really the elite elites, And that's part of the problem that the common man has with understanding what's happening. Because they don't know what it's like to be that educated, to understand human psychology beyond even like a normal PhD level, They have had knowledge that goes beyond what is taught in even Ivy League institutions for the most part, since Greece and ancient China, and and part of that, by the way, has always been the science and art of controlling people. And I have a book on the floor written by a 33rd degree Mason where he talks about this, how the pharaohs even and the Romans and whatnot, that the science and art of controlling people was like one of their main focal points. And they're drawing on a superior level of psychology, psychological understanding. And, there's no way for the average person to really relate to how those minds work. And so that's one of the reasons that they're so able to maintain these, what seem to me to be completely insane, lack of perception of what's happening, when it's so obvious that the thing that most people believe couldn't possibly be true. There's no possibility of it. Yeah, somebody asked if I see civil war happening in the United States regardless of who wins the election. I mean, I would think so. More so if Trump loses. I think that's a bigger possibility. The Democrats are mostly just like middle class yuppies, I think, at this point. I don't really see them going up in arms. The right, on the other hand, I think a lot of them will flip out. Either way that it goes, it's going to serve the purposes of the overlords, though. That's the thing. It's all been set up so that the consequence of it all is equally beneficial to them, right? Because Trump loses, civil war breaks out, they have an excuse for martial law. They have an excuse to take the guns, all kinds of things that they're trying to do anyways. On the other hand, if Trump wins, they already have Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation all lined out, purge the government of Democrats and get them out of the educational institutions and get complete control of legislation and the minds of the people through the education systems. They're talking about dismantling all of the FBI, Department of Education, CIA, all this stuff that really sounds good at face value. But if you have any sense at all, that they're going to create a vacuum and then they're going to fill that vacuum, and that the things they fill the vacuum with will be completely under the control of Trump's overlords, because he's not the real boss. He's a figurehead. Speaking of all that, one of the founding trustees and authors of Project 2025 endorsed Harris a few weeks ago. Bet you haven't heard anything about that in the mainstream news. So, with that right there, that should be almost enough for anyone to understand that if the Heritage Foundation has endorsed both sides, and this Project 2025 is designed to rid the government of the other party, and even the financial institutions, amongst other things, consolidating into one party. Either way the cookie crumbles, it's the same end result. Meanwhile, just take me as an example. I'm not a politician. I'm not even formally educated. And yet, I have offered in this stream viable solutions, or at least inroads to progress, with some of these massive wedge issues. So I have a really hard time believing that the overlords or even the presidential candidates couldn't do at least as good of a job if they had any intent of doing anything but divide and conquer, you know? Another great example, and I think I talked about this in the last stream, but, you know, Jimmy Dore, who is someone I do not follow, I feel like he's closer to my position or point of view than any of the other, what's going on, Orbis? Any of the other, I don't know what to call them, pundits or, you know, political commentator types, which, by the way, Elon Musk's family has connections to the CIA. What is that guy? They got fired from Fox. God damn it. You guys know who I'm talking about. His family had CIA connections. Andrew Tate's family has CIA connections. There's another one too that I'm pretty sure. But anyways, you guys see what I'm getting at there. You know, it doesn't seem to me like much of a, I think Peterson, maybe. No, he's Canadian. There is another one that has, is it the little Jewish guy? Yeah, it is the Jewish guy. That's the other one. It's a bit odd, isn't it? The biggest mouthpieces on both sides of the aisle all have well, that was all right wing, huh? Wow, that's it. Tucker Carlson. Yep, thank you. Anyways, Jimmy Dore was talking about how, you know, the United States the government does not care about you. If they did, they would do stuff. You know, their streets are crawling with homeless people. They're sending all this money to Israel. You know, and he talked about how Gaddafi had, you know, every single Libyan would have a home. They got a cut of the oil revenue, free electricity, free water, education. And if they couldn't get the education they wanted in Libya, the government would pay for them to go and get education elsewhere, free in other countries, free healthcare, you know, all of this stuff. And they killed him for setting an example, you know, incontrovertible proof that when the United States tries to convince the citizens that it has the best way and that it's the best in every, you know what I mean? They can't have that. They literally, every time a country is about to really supersede the U.S. in all of these, you know, by all these different metrics, there's a CIA coup and it's unraveled. But that's the thing, and that's why this is so unarguable at this point. The systems that would fix a lot of what's broken in the United States have been tried and proven by numerous countries. Why isn't that part of the discussion? Like, that is like, should be like the main focal point. These are all of the most important things to any nation. Healthcare, education, happiness. If there are countries that all have the same system in place and they're killing it, we're not even talking about that at our presidential debates. If you don't think that's deliberate, you're a fucking moron. Seriously, you're a fucking moron. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They'll talk about these things, but you're not hearing that, you know, Finland and Norway and Denmark and all these places have, you know, had these innovations that have been super successful, and we're going to do that too. They have conditioned people to fight on their behalf, especially, you know, on the right, as far as big business goes. You know, they are mouthpieces for big oil and mostly energy. You know, it's kind of seems like they kind of have the left aligned with big pharma more, the rhetoric, and then on the right, it's the energy companies. But also defending these systems, like American capitalism, which, if they did not solely serve the purposes and work for the benefit of the overlords, we would be looking at other systems and discussing them rather than demonizing them. And they have people so conditioned that they are fighting against their own interests and for the benefit and in the interest of their captors, really. You know, and in a way, I wouldn't really care, but what kills me is just the waste of human potential, not to mention all the unnecessary suffering that is a consequence of this exploitation and sleight of hand misdirection. It is a great tragedy, and it makes absolutely no sense to me, because the wealthy that are behind all of this stuff have enough money to drive a Lamborghini off a cliff every day and buy another one and just do that every day. You know, to eat gold-plated caviar for every meal and still have enough money left over to support generation after generation. They have people so conditioned that people will defend the right of billionaires to be billionaires. Which to me is, you know, I don't see how a common person could find these things coming out of their mouth and not realize that those thoughts had been implanted in their heads. Because there are no self-made billionaires. Not that I can find. And I also have not ever been able to find one that doesn't benefit from child slave labor like Elon Musk. They are starting from an advantageous position. And if it was me, you would think, you know, I would think that I would just be so happy that I was born into this advantageous, privileged position. And I wouldn't think of actually exploiting people, killing people, to make my fortune even bigger than absolutely stupendous. I have no ability to comprehend this. You know? And another interesting element of this is that this rogue exploitation, this insane greed, creates an existential danger for the people that are causing it. And yet, they persist. Maybe it's something in line with addiction that I just can't comprehend. You know, maybe they're just like junkies that just will do anything to get another fix. But from my point of view, it seems like if I had a string of 11 zeros in my bank and I added another one, it just... I don't feel like I would get a rush from that, you know, or that I would, it's just like, who cares? What am I going to do with this? What's the point? All right. It's after midnight here. Somebody asked if I think it's possible to sell your soul. So before I check out, I'll answer that question, I guess. I don't really believe in the devil. I think that evil is actually just kind of a neutral is the wrong way to put it. But I heard this Christian say something like, you know, the positive and the construction and generation is all God, and then evil is just kind of the absence of that. So it's a product of chaos more than it's an actual force, in the same way that life is a force. Death is kind of the force is no longer a force. So no, I don't really think so, unless you're talking about selling your soul to an entity that exists on the earth, or some sort of agreement, a decision you make within yourself to have no moral substance and no integrity or something. But no, I don't think that you can sell your soul for the benefit of riches and glory and unlimited, booty or whatever. So it is late, and I still want to get some practicing done on the guitar. So I hope this, I can't imagine that nearly everything I said in this stream isn't just preaching to the choir to people that already know it all, I hope that's not true. It'd be amazing if I was able to reach anyone that wasn't aware and hadn't considered these things, or maybe I'm able to help people consider it in more depth, but that's kind of a frustrating element of this, is that I know that this political awakening, if you look at the individual on the microcosmic level, usually awakening happens in these stages, and the political one is the first one, and then you start moving through the other levels, but that's like the first level. So I think that on the macro level, that's how it has to happen, just like it does in the micro. And so one way or another, if we're going to get out of this mess, the first thing we have to do is shine the light where people are refusing to look, and then figure out how to deal with what we find there once there's enough of us that we can actually have any kind of meaningful impact. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. We need your support in order to continue making videos, because I am demonetized. And we also have room at our events in November, from November 15th to December 15th, and also a couple of spots in May in the jungle. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. And salud.